Today on Commander Replay, we take a look at some really interesting tech from this mono-white Heliod Cedh deck. Next on Commander Replay. Hey guys, are you looking to get some card alters done? If so, be sure to check out revelandslight.com because they do absolutely amazing work. Welcome back everyone, doing a little deck tech today on Heliod Suncrowned Cedh. This past weekend, a mono-white Heliod Suncrowned deck finished in the finals of a large online Cedh tournament with 118 participants. So I wanted to talk about this deck. There's a lot of cool things going on here. You guys know me, I play Winota, and this deck and Winota have a lot of overlap, so there's a lot of things that I find interesting in this deck, and some things that I'll probably adopt into Winota as well. But I also like the story here. The creator of this deck, Michael Levine, started playing this deck back in January when Heliod came out, and they've just been grinding Cedh events with it, tweaking it, updating things, testing stuff out, and like this is their deck. They've been rolling with it, and I remember reading about it. They were having success out of the gate with it in some smaller events, and now they're starting to have success in some bigger events with this deck. It's pretty cool. Also, I filmed a gameplay video with this deck, so be sure to go check that out as well. But yeah, let's get into the deck tech. So first, just peeking at the mana curve, we see 29 lands, which is a little bit low even for Cedh for my liking. They do have a lot of mana rocks, but I'd still probably add 2 or 3 lands if this were my deck. But we also see a couple 0 drops, 27 1 drops, good to be low on the curve, and most of the stuff in here looks pretty impactful. You could certainly decide to make some different decisions. One of the ones that I get, but it's not my favorite, is Detainment Spell, and that one actually showed up in the game. This is going to be more so for like green decks and stopping Selvala and infinite mana type shenanigans that can happen pretty quickly. But it is bad against stuff like Drannith Magistrate, which has been a really problematic card in the Cedh format. So you have a choice right here of like, do you want something that stops activated abilities, or do you want something that's hard removal? That's a bit of a choice. There's another card called Oppressive Rays, which I also like because it says a creature can't attack or block unless its controller pays 3. There was a Winota in the game that we played, and that would have been at least a little bit helpful against Winota. So I'd personally probably go for that, but the one upside to Detainment Spell is that you can move it, so that is nice. So, you know, trade-off there just depends on what you really want. But I'm going to separate this deck into some piles, and we'll kind of talk more about it that way. Okay, so the 2 piles right here, here's our 2 main win conditions. The first one is Triskelion and Walking Ballista. If you put lifelink on them with Heliod, you'll go infinite as soon as you start pinging things. And that's the primary win condition for this deck. Scrapyard Recombiner is a tutor to be able to go find those things. Of course, Enlightened Tutor also helps. Also, Ranger of Eos and Ranger Captain of Eos can also both find Walking Ballistas, so that's super helpful as well. So here's your main win pile, actually. Recruiter will also be able to find Walking Ballista. Okay, I think I found them all. So yeah, we've got Triskelion, we've got Walking Ballista, and we've got 5 tutors to be able to find those. So Scrapyard, Enlightened, Ranger, Other Ranger, and Recruiter of the Guard. So that's not too bad. All things considered for a mono white deck, 5 tutors is pretty reasonable. Now, they're all a little bit narrow. They're not Vampiric Tutor, obviously. But in the game that I played, we did have a tutor available to us. So, you know, as long as you're drawing one of them, you should be able to get your win con. So I definitely like that. The other way we can go about getting a win is by doing the Knowledge Pool lock. And that involves having Knowledge Pool in play, and any of these cards that say players can only cast 1 spell per turn. Ideally, ones that say each opponent can't cast 1 spell per turn. So like Drannith Magistrate, for example, is a one-sided lock. You can still cast spells, but your opponents can't. So that's a really nice one. But the other ones will get it done. From that point, it's just a matter of like Heliod pumping stuff and just swing away until you can grind them down and make your creatures big enough to swing through, which shouldn't take that much. And if you can get one of these equipments in, like Umezawa's or a Light and Shadow, that'll probably speed the process up a little bit as well. So there's the main win cons from the deck. I like it because most of this stuff doesn't take up a lot of room in the deck and has other purposes as well. Like, both Rangers are just good for finding things in the deck. Walking Ballista and Triskelion can both double as removal also, which is nice. Rule of Law, all these type of effects are just great against most CEDH decks. So you'd want to be running these anyway because they shut down consultation. You know, you're basically adding one card with the knowledge pool to set up the lock. So, and the deck's creator did say that they weren't a fan of the knowledge pool lock, and I had actually messaged them about it many months ago, and they're like, I'm not a fan. But once Archon of Emeria got printed, they're like, well, now there's another one of these. There's a lot of them. So they decided that they wanted to try out the knowledge pool lock. I haven't seen them make any verdict on it, whether it's something they want to continue with. But I probably would, just because it's one card versus 5 cards you probably already want to run anyway. And by 5, I mean it's actually 6, because math. So let's put all these right here. We can move these to the side. There's some other things I want to talk about in this deck as well. If you play white in CDH, you're probably used to seeing some amount of these other things. Okay, so I've made a few more piles. This big pile right here, these are fairly standard Stax pieces that if you play white in CDH, you're probably used to seeing some of these, or if you play Stax decks at all. So I don't think there's too much to talk about here. Some of the less obvious ones may be like Suture Priest is good if someone's trying to do a Kiki combo. If they try to make infinite creatures, they will die. Ashes of the Abhorrent is interesting. I don't normally care for this card that much, but it's good for Underworld Breach combos. And Life Gain is also relevant to Heliod as well, so I think it's actually a pretty good fit for this deck, even though it's not my favorite card. So yeah, fairly standard choices as far as white creatures are concerned right there. Let's take a look at this pile. These are the cards that I think are a bit more interesting, a little spicier, things that you don't see as much. Here's one that I found really interesting, and that's Order of the Sacred Torch. I have one of these in a binder that I'm surprised I haven't thought about it up to this point, but it's a 3-mana 2/2. It says tap, pay 1 life, counter target black spell. So that's going to be your consultation. It's going to be the, what's the other one? Tainted, it's not Tainted Remedy, Tainted whatever it is. Consultation number 2 in that deck. It's going to be your Ad Nauseum. It's going to be Kess. All cards that are like generally problematic in CEDH. And you can generally bet that there's going to be some black at the table in CEDH because like Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor are so strong, and Consultation is one of the top decks and goes in a lot of decks. So I really like this inclusion. I'm going to add this to Winota. It is a human, so pretty excited about that one. Skyclave Apparition is a new card, and everything I've been hearing about this card is that it's been great because you exile the thing and then it's sort of like Pongify for any permanent basically. So the 3/3 never matters that much. You're much happier to get rid of the thing that you're killing. So Skyclave Apparition, pretty cool. Umezawa's Jit, very good card, something potentially worth considering for Winota. It is essentially the Planeswalker equipment. It's removal, life gain, and pumping, so lots of really good stuff there. And the it doesn't take much. A lot of CEDH creatures, 2 and 3 toughness, even a lot of 1 toughness stuff also. So plenty of things to shoot, even if you only have 2 counters on it. Mask of Memory for the card draw, a card I've always liked. Just that, it can be a little bit awkward. There does tend to be like mana dorks and stuff running around. But mono white does struggle for draw quite a bit. Some newer cards, we got Kabira Takedown. I actually looked at this one in the game, and this is something I want to start using more. This does actually look pretty interesting in the right deck. Decks that can produce a lot of creatures, so probably going to slot that in. Sajiri Shelter. This one's also pretty good. Protection from a color does stop a lot of targeted bounce, can stop the Pyroclasm type stuff, so at least for 1 creature. So that is really nice. Another one that's interesting is Alseid of Life's Bounty. Sacrifice a target creature, gains protection from the color until end of turn. It's also lifelink. This is a non-human, so probably something I need to add into Winota. Another great protection creature. Benevolent Bodyguard, another one that may have gone under the radar. Also a great protection creature as well. And this is just for protecting your stuff, especially trying to protect your Walking Ballista, your Triskelion. So those are really good. A third one that was not on my radar, is Devoted Caretaker. Does cost 1 mana to activate, gains protection from instants and sorceries until end of turn, so that's going to be most of your CEDH spells. Pretty nice. Silence is a mainstay of CEDH, but it's just a fantastic card, especially if you're trying to shut down spell decks, if you're trying to shut down Thassa's Oracle, anything like that. Silence is going to be really good for that type of stuff. So those are the picks that I thought were really interesting. They've got a Light and Shadow in the deck as well, be able to get their stuff back. The life gain, probably not the most relevant, but you never know. But protection from 2 colors, Swords to Plowshares, and any black removal, also very solid, so that's pretty cool. And I've talked to people about this, that like in CEDH, because everything is so small, that giving a creature +2/+2 makes it huge. And you can now just swing away and just try to get there with combat damage, amongst all the stacks and everything else that's happening. And then finally, I'm going to take a look at some mana production and some other stuff in the deck. The deck's creator does also have Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes in the deck for some additional protection as well. So here's what our mana production looks like, and actually to be a little bit more accurate with it, we should pull out some of the lands that are actually ramp. Okay, so we're looking at about 18 pieces of ramp once we also count the lands that produce extra. Pretty good count overall. Some of these just find lands like Weathered Wayfarer and Tithe, but Weathered Wayfarer especially can find any land, so can find the best stuff. City of Traders is an interesting one. Pretty expensive. Not a card I had thought about very much, but I could see it. I could see why getting that extra mana would be super helpful. Got to be careful about when you play it, though. Definitely some trade-offs there. Gemstone Caverns is great, but getting a little expensive in paper. Serra's Sanctum, your commander is an enchantment, so you're always going to be able to get at least one off of it if you have your commander. So I like that. Also a pretty expensive card. Remote Farm is not one that I had thought about. Enters the battlefield tapped with 2 depletion counters on it. Remove a depletion counter, add 2 white mana. If there are no depletion counters, sacrifice it. So it gives you a little burst of mana. That's definitely something worth trying out, especially in Winota for me. But I do think that's an interesting pick. Nykthos, certainly very interesting. If you have a couple permanents in play, can get you some extra mana, can be nice. Mishra's Workshop, super expensive, but great for your artifacts. And if someone drops an Urborg for some reason, you can get natural mana out of it as well. Ancient Tomb, of course. Then you've got Grim Monolith, a common card. Legion's Landing, great for these high creature count decks. 32 creatures in the deck. Land tax, of course. I added a Tithe. I felt like 29 lands is a little bit too low without some other way to search for land, so I like Tithe. Weathered Wayfarer, great for low land count decks like this. Springleaf Drum, also fast mana for these heavy creature count decks. Sol Ring, of course. Mox Diamond, super expensive. These have jumped $400 in the last year. That's insane. Mana Crypt, Lotus Petal, and Chrome Mox. You know what, the two I actually like Chrome Mox better for this deck because you have 29 lands, and at 29 lands, you're not always going to have a land to discard to Mox Diamond. So, But yeah, there's the mana ramp of the deck. Some other interesting lands, we got Bazaar of Baghdad. This was an online tournament, so they didn't have to actually buy the paper copies of some of these cards because the paper cost of this deck is absurd. It was like $11,000 or something around there. And Bazaar is one of the big ones that affects that. Mishra's Workshop was another big one. There's 1 or 2 other heavy hitters in the deck that were also pretty expensive too. Because I started looking at the deck, I'm like, oh, this deck doesn't seem that expensive. And like, sure, this stuff isn't that expensive, but this stuff is. And I was kind of shocked about how high the cost actually was. One other card I wanted to touch on real quick, which I thought was pretty interesting, is this Thran Foundry. This can do 2 things. So it's 1 to cast, 1 to activate. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library. Obviously, if your combo pieces are in your graveyard, that's a way to put them back in your library, which can be nice. The other thing that it does is this can also stop a Vampiric Tutor or similar type of tutor that puts a card on top by forcing them to shuffle. And this is actually a piece of tech that I've been looking for quite a while, so this is kind of an interesting card. I definitely want to try this out at some point. During editing, I also learned that this card has 2 additional roles. If someone's trying to Thassa's Oracle, you can shuffle their graveyard back into their library, and they won't win the game. And the other thing you can do with it, if they're trying to like Noxious Revival something back from their graveyard to the top of their library, you can use it as pseudo graveyard removal as well. So a lot of different modes that have me really interested in this card. But anyway, yeah, this is a pretty cool deck. Congrats to Michael on their finish with the deck. Overall, it looks really cool, so if you guys are looking to play some mono-white CEDH, definitely check out this deck list, and if you want to chat with the deck's creator, you can certainly leave him a comment as well. And anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching. I want to thank my awesome Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. If you want to help support the channel and vote on which decks I play next, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below.